I never told anyone what happened that morning in November of 1969. Not my manager, not my closest friend, not even the woman I loved for 32 years before she left this world without me. I kept it folded inside me like a piece of paper in a coat pocket you forget about until the coat doesn't fit anymore. I am 91 years old now. My hands shake when I hold a coffee cup. The light comes in different in the mornings than it used to, quieter somehow. And I think about that diner. I think about it almost every single day. It was a Tuesday. That I know for certain because we played Memphis on the Monday. And I always felt strange on the day after a show. Empty in a way I couldn't explain to people who hadn't felt it. You give something away on a stage, something real. And the morning after, it's just gone. And you're left ordinary again. We were driving south through a stretch of Mississippi I'd passed through 100 times. Pine trees on both sides of the highway. That particular gray the sky gets in November down there. Not storm gray, not fog, just used up. Like the sky had worked all year and was tired. Our driver pulled in for gas at a little place called Calhoun's. It wasn't much. A pump, a small grocery, and a diner attached on the right side that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, even from the parking lot. I didn't have to go in. I wasn't hungry, but I went in anyway. The place had maybe 8 tables, red vinyl chairs with electrical tape over the cracks, a ceiling fan that wobbled but didn't fall. There was a jukebox against the far wall that wasn't playing anything. I sat at the counter, ordered black coffee. That's when I noticed her. She was in the corner booth, a woman maybe 30 years old, in a pale yellow dress that was too thin for November. She had her hair pinned back crooked, like she'd done it in a moving vehicle or without a mirror. She wasn't eating. She had a cup of water in front of her and a little girl beside her, maybe 4 years old, who was drawing something on the back of a paper placemat with a broken crayon. The woman wasn't looking at anything. That specific kind of not looking that isn't rest. It's the kind you do when you're solving something terrible inside your head and there's no room left for the outside world. I watched her the way you watch someone when you recognize something in them you felt yourself. The waitress refilled my coffee without asking. I thanked her. She nodded the way people do in diners. Automatic, efficient, kind, in the way that costs nothing. I overheard the woman in the booth ask the waitress quietly, like she was embarrassed about it, whether she could use the telephone and back. The waitress said it was for staff only, said it with an apology in her voice, but she said it. The woman nodded, folded her hands in her lap, looked down at her daughter, who was still drawing, completely at peace, making a picture of something yellow. I couldn't tell what it was from where I sat. I went back to my coffee. Here's what I know about myself at 34 years old. I was not a bad man. I was not a cruel man. I was, however, a man who had been treated like something extraordinary for so long that I quietly, without realizing it, stopped paying attention to ordinary things. I noticed the woman. I noticed something was wrong. I did not ask. I left a $20 bill on the counter, which was generous for a coffee in 1969, and I knew that, and I felt good about it, and I walked back out to the car. I remember the door of the diner had a little bell above it. I remember the sound of it as I left. We drove south. I fell asleep somewhere around the state line. When I woke up, we were already in Louisiana, and someone had put a blanket over me, and the pine trees were different there, fuller, darker, and I didn't think about the woman in the diner again for a very long time. Life has a way of filling itself back up. New cities, new stages, new mornings that feel the same as the last. The diner became one of 1,000 diners. The woman in the yellow dress became a shadow. In the spring of 2003, I had been retired for years by then, living quietly, speaking to almost no one. A young journalist came to do a profile piece on me. She drove out to the house. She was maybe 40 years old, professional, careful with her words. We sat on the back porch. She had a recorder and a notebook, and she asked the kinds of questions people always ask at the end of a long life, about the music, about the years, about what I missed. About halfway through, she set her pen down. She said, "I need to tell you something, and then I need to ask you something." I said, "All right." She said she'd been doing research for the piece. Said she'd come across a diary, a woman's diary from a county archive in Mississippi, donated after the woman's death in 1987 by her daughter. The woman's name was Clara May Hutchins. She had written about a Tuesday in November of 1969 when she and her 4-year-old daughter stopped at a diner called Calhoun's on their way, on foot most of the way, to a county clinic 14 miles south. Her daughter had a fever that had been climbing for 3 days. She had 70 cents in her purse. She needed bus fare. She was trying to work up the courage to ask a stranger. She wrote, "A man sat at the counter." I almost asked him. I didn't. Then he left, and the waitress brought me a $20 bill and said the man at the counter had left it. She said he'd left before she could say anything to him. I sat there, and I cried a little because I didn't know how else to feel it. I took the bus. We made it in time. They gave her something for the fever. She was better by morning. The journalist picked her pen back up. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "My name is Diane Hutchins. Clara May was my mother. I was the little girl drawing the picture." I didn't say anything for a long time. There are moments in a life where the world rearranges itself into something you can't quite fit into words, where you realize that an ordinary Tuesday morning, a cup of coffee, a $20 bill, a bell above a door, had weight you couldn't have calculated at the time. I didn't ask that woman if she was all right. I didn't offer the telephone in my car. I didn't do anything particularly meaningful. I left money on a counter the way you leave money on a counter. And somewhere, 14 miles south of Calhoun's, Mississippi, a little girl's fever broke. Diane Hutchins had spent 3 years trying to find out who the man at the counter was. A waitress she tracked down, elderly by then, remembered that day, remembered him, gave her enough to go on. She sat across from me on my back porch in 2003. She was calm and professional, and she had become a journalist, and she had a daughter of her own now. She said, "I don't know if you remember. I just wanted you to know what happened after you left." I told her I remembered the diner. I told her I remembered the woman who wasn't eating. I told her, and this is the part I've never said out loud to anyone else, not before and not since, that I almost didn't stop, that we had pulled in for gas and I didn't need to go inside, that I went in for no particular reason, that I left because I was tired and I had a long drive ahead, and I told myself the woman probably had someone to help her. I told her I thought about her sometimes, which was a lie. I'd forgotten completely. She didn't seem to need me to be better than I was. She just said she wrote about you in the diary every year on that Tuesday. She called you the man at the counter. She never knew your name. I am 91 years old. I have done things in this life that people call extraordinary. I have stood in front of crowds so large I couldn't see the edges. I've felt the kind of love from strangers that you can't really understand unless it's happened to you. None of it feels as large to me tonight as that bell above the door of a diner I almost didn't walk into. I don't tell this story because it makes me look good. I tell it because it almost didn't happen. Because I almost got back in the car. Because a woman in a yellow dress almost asked a different stranger, or no stranger at all. Because 14 miles is a very long way to walk in November with a sick child and 70 cents. I have no wisdom to offer you, only this. You don't always know what you're doing when you do it. Sometimes you're just a man who wanted a cup of coffee, and that has to be enough.